All right, hopefully I'm on. Hey, friends, we're gonna be get started within the next T minus 30 seconds. The man is in the house. So thanks for joining us today. Hopefully it'll be helpful. So I'm gonna hand it over to Pastor Tim.
Well, if you thought you were going to Disneyland this weekend, that is not happening. Come on in, David. We just heard that Disneyland is now closed indefinitely, and that's crazy. It's been a wild couple days. I thought I'd just very quickly tell you a little bit about our process here at Grace Central Coast. I'm here with David Leese. He's a doctor who's been actively involved in our church for a long, long time. And yesterday this week, as everybody has, we've been game planning and just trying to figure out what do we do in response to this growing coronavirus threat. And we spent hours together as a leadership team on Tuesday, really game planning. And at that point in time, it was like, hey, let's put gloves on, welcome people, and let's not pass the offering, but do offering boxes. And let's change the way we do our courtyard refreshments. And we talked through this thing for a couple hours, and came up with this great plan. We created a 5-minute video, sent it out to our people last evening after our elders got together and kind of affirmed the plan. And then, as everybody knows, the bottom fell out. NBA canceled its stuff, and it was just crazy. And then I got an email from David late last night, really urging our team, our elders and staff, to take more drastic measures. And so David and I were able to connect with some of our team this morning. It was such a valuable time. And as we brainstormed together, we thought, could we put something together like this as a resource for other Central Coast pastors? And I know there's even somebody from Santa Barbara tuning in. I know there's 5 Cities guys. And thank you so much for your time. We hope this is really, really valuable. So you sent me a Q&A. You want to just walk through that, David?
Sure.
First of all, why don't you just tell us who you are, what you do, your relationship to Grace? I know you've got like major responsibility, I think, in Kern County. Is that right?
Well, both here in San Luis Obispo and Kern County.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I'm a family physician. I've been here in the Central Coast for 30 years, practiced here in San Luis Obispo for over 20 years. But most recently, I've been helping manage a couple medical groups, one here in San Luis Obispo County, one over in Kern County, and still actively involved in the medical community, but doing more along the lines of population health and those types of things these days.
Okay, so just for the sake of everybody's time, I'm just going to ask you the questions,
Okay.
and you can riff and
All
do
right.
what you want to do. Okay, so what is COVID-19, David?
So COVID-19 is a viral illness. It is a part of a family of coronaviruses. There's several different coronaviruses that some of them are responsible for the common cold, and have been around for many, 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 many years. But COVID-19 is a mutation, a new strain of that virus that became evident a couple of months ago, about 3 months ago in China. And it mutated to a degree where it causes both a more severe illness than most coronaviruses do, and also has some characteristics to it that make it more infectious, more easily to spread than some of the other viruses, coronaviruses like SARS and MERS that were also coronaviruses that had severe disease, but did not spread nearly as widely as this virus is.
Okay, so how is COVID-19 diagnosed?
So COVID-19 clinically is difficult to diagnose because it pretty much the symptoms mirror influenza and just many common viruses. Right now, there is a test that can be done through a nasal swab, but the big challenge and really what's facing, I think, a lot of making this very difficult for us to deal with is that testing in the United States has been really very limited availability since it hit the United States a couple of weeks ago. And then, of course, if patients get sick, they'll have pneumonia and things that will be showing up on chest X-rays and CAT scans. But the definitive diagnosis is through a nasal swab.
Okay, and I think you said this morning that there's been very little testing here on the Central Coast.
Correct. So I confirmed that our public health department in San Luis Obispo County started doing testing capabilities about a week ago, so end of last week. They've done probably a handful of tests since that period of time. And currently, again, locally here, it's been limited to patients who are sick. So generally in the hospital, no other reason for them to be as sick as they are. And typically they've ruled out for influenza and the other reasons. And then the COVID is done in that regard. And it's been limited because we just haven't had the capabilities. That's ramping up quickly, but we have been unable to have the test available to test on lower symptomatic patients or identify whether the disease is present in the community in less severe situations, but still spreading.
Okay, so one of the things you said this morning was that um, testing is not it's not available in the community, and though there are no known cases, no known infections, confirmed infections, that doesn't matter. We still should be taking, because I know our team has been operating under the assumption like we'll just wait for a known diagnosis here on the Central Coast. That'll be the trigger for us. But you've really said, no, we got to take action now. So explain that a little
So
bit.
that's really I think the big question right now and the big challenge. And I certainly don't have the complete answers, nor should I be the final word. But when people have modeled this, epidemiologists, and when testing is done only on sick patients, patients who have severe disease, and that's where your first positive test comes because you're unable to do much testing otherwise, there typically has been a lot of spread in the community prior to that person becoming positive because many patients are asymptomatic or don't have much symptoms, and so they don't even present for care, and the spread goes on under the radar. Uh, the virus replicates fairly rapidly, and there's a doubling in infections in a typical community about every 5 to 6 days.
Mm.
And that doubling becomes an exponential growth, and it takes time for patients to get sick enough to be in the hospital. And so there's been some situations where when the first disease tested came back positive in a sick hospitalized patient, they modeled that there was maybe 500 cases in the community under the radar when that first case was diagnosed.
Mm.
And so, although the public health recommendations initially were dictated as to whether or not there was community spread, which means there's been diagnosed cases from within the community as opposed to someone coming in from a risk area and bringing disease in, that up until just the last couple of days, that was sort of when you started to do your decision making about social distancing and those types of things. But because of these changes, the California Department of Public Health, just in the last day or two, kind of eliminated that recommendation as your guideline
Mm.
because of this fact that there probably is spread. All our surrounding counties, Tulare County's tested positive, Fresno County, Santa Barbara not yet, San Luis not yet, but it will be here.
And I know your view is it's already here. We just haven't found it yet. And when we have, I think you said it, but I want to say it again. When we have a diagnosed case, that probably, in your estimation, others' estimation, that probably represents 500 to 1,000. Is that?
If that's a
Yeah.
community spread case. So
Okay.
that's not talking about someone coming from a foreign
Okay.
country, bringing it in and them getting it, catching it from somewhere else. That's a case where there's no known exposure, no known travel history, that kind of situation.
Mhm. Talk about those who are vulnerable.
So again, this disease is, less severe than something like SARS, but is much more complicated and severe than influenza or just flu. And that risk stratifies based on age primarily, but also whether patients have people have underlying cardiac or pulmonary disease. It primarily people under 50. There's a very, very much lower risk of having complications or getting real sick from it, requiring hospitalization or anything like that. Over 70, that goes up dramatically. And the case fatality rate is probably somewhere in the 15 to 20% rate in patients that are over 70 and have complicating conditions or over 80. And so those are our real vulnerable patients in the sense, or our population that we really need to do something to protect them from being exposed to this virus.
Mm-hmm.
And because of those high consequences if they do get infected.
So because symptoms aren't seen for a time, there could be carriers they may not know they're carriers. So even contact with grandparents. I mean, there can be that's what we're facing here.
Correct. And the other thing I guess that I forgot to mention too is that we do know that the virus sheds from patients or from people who get infected, starting at least probably about 3 days before they start having any symptoms. And actually, the highest shedding of that virus, contagiousness of that virus,
Mm.
is really the first couple of days you're sick, which is when the symptoms are milder. And so, again, relying on when symptoms develop isn't it's challenging in this situation and fraught with the ability for things to increase and to spread very very rapidly.
So we've got a bunch of pastors that are, trying to figure out how to lead their churches.
Sure.
So what can we do to protect our community and avoid a surge in disease that could overwhelm our system? Talk about that and the overwhelming of our system a bit.
Well, again, I think yeah, part of this is trying to mitigate at this point to prevent just an overwhelming illness burden that would, if there was enough cases that would require hospitalization, ICU care, those types of things, really put a burden on our system. And so, again, sort of being proactive and trying to avoid some of the things that have happened in other countries. Italy, for example, Northern Italy right now, they are out of ICU beds in Northern Italy right now, and there are, severe cases. They've had over 1,000 deaths now, and it just became just a tidal wave that was hard to manage. And so again, it was a situation where they just got behind the curve. And so part of being proactive in your mitigation is to prevent that surge, to spread that over time, so that people who do get sick, aren't their care isn't impacted by a lack of resources. And so again, that's part of the reasoning that people are being much more aggressive in the social distancing. The Department of Public Health last night, Governor Newsom made recommendations for over 250 to limit those and cancel those events, 250 people. And I think, from a programmatic standpoint or a standpoint of public gatherings, those things need to be considered very seriously.
Hmm.
On a personal level, I think it's protecting the elderly people in our communities, and really trying to have them self-isolate, not self-isolate, but to basically protect exposure to a high-risk situation.
Yeah, so let's just talk about our church, just because it's the one you know,
Yeah.
and you were concerned enough to reach out to me. And what was your hope in doing that? And maybe talk about the makeup of our church. There's guys
Yeah.
joining us who are pastoring different kinds of churches. They're made up of different
Right.
demographics. But talk a little bit about what you know about our church.
So again, our Sunday service here in San Luis Obispo is more than 250 people,
Hmm.
several services. And when I look out at the congregation, a lot of them have gray hair and,
Hmm.
are over 60, over 70, over 80. And we have a lot of college students. You mix those two things together, and the college students are going to be fine. They're not going to get. If they have the cold, if they have coronavirus, they're going to be fine. They'll be sick for a few days, but they'll be fine. But if you mix that with, a high risk population, that high risk population is a concern. So, for me, the reason to reach out to you, Tim, was some changes in what was being recommended from
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
public standpoint. Um, the significant population of elder adults in our congregation, and also, from where I sit as a physician and somebody who's taking care of a community of patients, just seeing what's happened in some of the areas that haven't taken this seriously, is a frightening thought.
Hmm. Just to go back just a little bit, just let's scare the guys if we can. Talk a little bit about the rest home in Washington, and kind of like, boy,
Yeah,
that
and
really
it's
got
sort
our
of an
attention this
example.
morning. Yeah.
This is sort of an example of just the severity of the disease, in a situation where a vulnerable population gets exposed. So there's a rest home up in Washington. 120 patients were in that facility. Got exposed, by a worker or by a visitor that came to the facility. And of those 120, 40 have passed away at this point in time. This has been
Wow.
going on for about 10 days, for 10 to 14 days. There's another, I think, 15 or 20 that are still in the hospital being treated. Several were at the end of their life anyways, so they passed away without going to the hospital and that kind of thing. Um, and over half of the staff tested positive, although none of the staff, because they were younger and healthy, didn't require severe care.
Mm.
But it again, what that highlights to me is just, again, when the disease takes hold in that vulnerable population, there are some very significant consequences. That is different. Again, influenza, that kind of goes through our community. It's over a long period of time. There's a lot of community protection because of flu shots. The nursing homes do get impacted by that each year, but it's not anything like this where it is so catastrophic.
Yeah, so here's where we're at as a team, and we've moved. We moved today, and we are about to announce to our church family this evening the suspension of Sunday services and all large group gatherings. We're essentially closing our campuses. We are allowing small groups to meet. We have 60 growth groups, 700 people in those growth groups. We're allowing those groups to meet at their own discretion. There's other men's and women's studies, but we're not going to do that on our campus. And we're kind of taking it on a week by week basis. Our reasons are really two. Three. We so appreciate David's counsel and we take it seriously. The direction of our governor, that was one of the things our elders talked about. They said, boy, when we have some direction from a state or a local government agency, we want to follow that direction, really, because we think that's in line with what the Bible teaches us to do, to submit to authorities over us. And so when our governor says, hey, don't gather more than 250 people, that for us was a trigger. That was an inflection point for us. And then I think what we've determined, and you've helped us do this, David, is that we really believe that the best way to care for our people and those most vulnerable in our church family is by suspending services. That if we really care, this is the right move to make. And it's a way for us to partner with others in our community, like healthcare providers and other agencies, really to seek the welfare of our community, join with others. You want to talk a little bit about the spike and how
epidemiologists talk about sort of the flattening of a curve in an epidemic like this, that again, the healthcare system is able to kind of take care of a certain level of burden of disease, which is very low at this point in time. I mean, our hospitals right now without any coronavirus are like at capacity. So if you think about a surge in disease that then, a percentage of patients going to require care, if you want to spread that out over time. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're all going to get exposed to this virus probably at some point until a vaccine is developed or until something happens. Most of us are going to be fine. I mean, there's not going to be an issue as far as, having a complicated illness, but when it hits in an epidemic form and there's a surge, it strains the system. Care can't be delivered. More people pass away because they just can't be taken care of. If you can flatten that curve by some of these actions from a community standpoint, it flattens that curve. The system is able to deal with it. Patients are able to get the care that they need. And so that's part of the strategy from a public health standpoint that we're looking at.
Makes sense. So that's where we're at, fellow pastors. And I know that Grace Bible in AG, I'm outing them right now. I know that they too have canceled Sunday services and large group gatherings. I know that other churches are contemplating. I know Calvary Slow is contemplating. We wanted to join with you. We actually think it could be a really powerful statement for churches to stand together in this. And what's that? Oh, new life now. Hey, okay, renovate. So there's just like everywhere else, we see the dominoes falling, and we just wanted to provide a public service announcement, hopefully some helpful data for you as you really make this difficult choice. Here's the reality for us. I mean, I was sharing with our team, I feel the weight of this decision because the reality is our church has been meeting together on Sundays for almost 90 years. And so to suspend services on those Sundays, that's huge. That's huge. I don't take that lightly. And yet our team has concluded together that this is the best choice we can make to love our own people and actually to serve the broader community. So that's where we're at. We got a few guys in the room. Any questions? Anything that we didn't cover that would be helpful for the guys? Yeah, we don't know. And maybe talk about that. I know your perspective. Yeah. So the question is, how many weeks are we doing this? David, I know you have some perspective on the timeline of this thing.
Yeah, and I think that it is a evolving dynamic. Again, I mentioned the testing not being available, that really having an impact on really giving us knowledge as to really how to act. I heard today that Cal Poly is extending their spring break for a week. I think the reason they're doing that is to give it some time, basically to kind of figure out how things are going to evolve in the community, and then make that decision. Many other obviously, a lot of other colleges are suspending spring quarters. So
Yeah.
my thought would be, at least as far as ramping up the testing, being able to get a sense as to what's happening in our local communities, that in a couple weeks, we're going to have a sense of that. I mean, either things are going to we'll start getting some positive tests, we'll know what's happening, and the testing capabilities will increase significantly to be able to make those better decisions. We still may have to make the same decisions, but
Yeah.
at least we'll be in a position to have more information to make a better informed decision. And so, I think taking this a little bit step by step and time by time, you look over, some of the other countries that have gone through this, South Korea, China. I mean, there has already been dramatic drops in the incidence of the disease. So it is a wave, and it's going to be a fairly quick wave. It's not to say that the virus won't come back, and it's going to hit in spots and it'll happen, but hopefully we'll have testing. We'll be able to identify the spots. We can do things in a much more targeted way. Right now, we just aren't able to do that. And because of the threat, I think there is call for broad action right now. And then, again, hopefully more targeted action, down the road.
Are some of these other countries, are they coming back online and getting back to normal life a little bit more?
As far as I know,
Okay.
but it really is, I think, going to be geographically dependent. And again, it sort of depends what happens, in that country. If you shut this down and not very many people get it, when it has a potential of coming back then and whereas a country that doesn't do anything, they get devastated by it, but they have now protection. They've lost a lot of people, unfortunately, and so they may not have recurrences. So, I think we're going to fall somewhere in between, because I don't think we're fully prepared, and I think there is going to be a big hit, especially in some geographic areas. We just don't know where that is at this point in time, and until we have a better sense of that, I think for a few weeks to kind of make these calls is appropriate.
What would be a minimum and a maximum? Like, I mean, I know, like maybe 3 to 4 weeks, 2 weeks.
I think
Would that be too-
Disneyland said they're closed till May.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the cruise lines shut down for 2 months or 6 weeks, I think, until May. So we're talking 6 weeks.
How long is grace? Do you guys have?
Yeah, so we really are not saying an end date. We're taking it week by week. We'll be continuing to
Is there a
converse
minimum
with
that
David.
you guys are projecting?
We really aren't.
Okay.
I mean, but obviously for all of us, Easter is in our near sights, and that's a huge outreach, obviously, for every church. And so, let me just say this too, because we're going online. The room you're seeing right now, we've been game planning all day. So I'm actually going to preach in this room on Sunday, early in the morning. We're going to have a service, including worship and all of our normal worship elements, online by 9:30. And we were talking about live stream. I think it's a little safer for us to actually post the video. The guys are trying to talk me out of live streaming. So I think we're probably going to post a video, but we're inviting our people to come worship together, like online though, at a particular time or whenever they can on Sundays. And we're going to encourage them. If you do feel comfortable meeting with your growth group, then gather together in your growth group and enjoy the service together. And so we aren't like going to the beach. We're providing a worship experience for our people. It's just going to look different and decentralized, and the technology just enables us to do that now. So yeah, so go ahead, and then I'll repeat your question.
So a question came in for churches without video capabilities. How can other churches with video capabilities help them?
Yeah, so we are happy to share content, and you're welcome. I mean, it'll be on our website. The link will be on our website, gracecentralcoast.org. I'm sure the other big churches in the
It is, yeah.
community are going to be doing the same. I think everybody will have their own strategy. Here's the thing about live streaming that our video guys, our tech guys are telling me, like, every church in the country is going to be trying to use YouTube on this Sunday. Are they going to be ready for that? And so they're trying to talk me out of it. So that's something for you to consider too. If you were just going to kind of do the YouTube live stream thing, our guys are saying, please, can we not do that? So just a heads up, we're thinking through these things, and you should too. Yeah, if you're interacting with one of the other guys in the room, feel free to send a question. We'll stay online for.
Also add them on the video feed itself.
Oh, okay, on the YouTube feed, if you want to leave a question there, we're looking at that. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was just gonna say too, for video capabilities, Facebook Live is always a good option. I mean, if you've got a pastor who's in his office or at home on the couch, you can just pop open a laptop, Facebook Live, preach your sermon to your congregation. Whoever has Facebook, which is quite a lot of people,
Yeah.
can just log in there, and that takes out all of the high tech. You don't have to worry about video. You don't have to worry about all that stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's a way to do it too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And here's the other reality for us. I mean, David talked about the elderly in our church family. We're aware that a lot of our older people don't use tech. I'm guessing that we're older than most of the younger churches in town, but we're talking about replicating CDs, and just we're asking. Here's the other thing we're doing. We're asking, how can we, since we can't gather as a church, we want to shift into another gear and really be the church and function like the church in some new and creative ways. And we're looking at how can we care for those who are high at risk, whether that's food delivery or providing food here. We have God's Storehouse, which is a food bank outlet, which is for hungry people. We're going to continue to do that. That'll be any care ministry we're going to continue to do. And in fact, we want to create some more during this unique season to really reach out to those most vulnerable. So we're still talking about those ideas and how those are going to come together, but we're leaning in and just trying to find new gears as a church and be the church in some fresh ways. So we think it's an opportunity. Anything else? So yeah, my personal pitch is join us. We think it'll be a powerful statement, and your church may not be in that situation quite like ours with our size, and yet I still think it would be powerful if you joined others, and we had as united a front as we could as a Christian community here on the Central Coast. So we trust that the Lord will lead you as you seek Him and as you work together with your teams, and we bless you as you figure stuff out. We're praying for you. Take care.